Let's get into a very important topic. In a recent report by 10x Investments, it reveals that black South Africans invest more in funeral and burial policies than in pension or provident funds or even retirement annuities. It further states that even though women live longer than men, more than 40% of women across all demographics have no investments or savings in any form. So to tell us more, we're joined by Senior Investment Analyst from 10x Investment, Chris Eddy. He's in our Sea Point studio. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome. Good to have you on the program.
Thanks, Leanne. Good morning to you and your listeners and viewers.
So this report I'm talking about is called the 10x Investments Retirement Reality Report. Give me a little bit of a synopsis and summary of the report.
Well, Leanne, according to National Treasury, only 6% of South Africans are going to be able to retire comfortably. And when we talk about retire comfortably, what we're really saying is that they will be able to maintain their standard of living that they enjoyed while they are working in retirement. And what we hope to achieve by releasing this report is to bring awareness, first of all, to this problem, and secondly, to dive a little bit deeper into some of the causes of why most South Africans won't be able to retire comfortably. Because it's only through dialogue and understanding the causes and actually creating engagement with everyday South Africans that we can hope to try address this major crisis that we're facing.
Yeah. So let's dig into it now. And, you know, I often wonder and ask the question, what is the thinking around rather investing in a funeral and burial policy rather in a pension and provident fund? Did you come up with any sort of concrete answers to this question?
Well, there are 2 points to that. I mean, one of the major reasons is that investing via a funeral policy or a burial policy is more affordable than in terms of your amount of money that you need to invest on a monthly basis than a retirement product. But I think a conclusion that can be drawn is that many South Africans are providing for when they are dead as opposed to actually when they are actually still alive and in retirement. The result of that is that when many South Africans potentially reach retirement, they could become dependent on friends, family, the state to support them because they haven't made enough provision for themselves. Some of the other findings from the reports, I think, which actually point to the fact that only 6% are able to retire comfortably is that from over 1 million South Africans were surveyed in this report, by the way, only 7% of respondents said they are confident in the retirement plan that they have and that in executing it, they'll be able to reach their retirement goals, which alludes to the 6% that are actually able to only retire comfortably. Yeah. Out of those as well, more than 60% of people either didn't have a plan at all or had a very vague plan which they didn't fully understand. And this really points to a certain lack of apathy or ignorance potentially around the importance of retirement savings in South Africa.
And that brings me to my next question, because at the heart of it all, it sounds like perhaps a lack of education, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is there perhaps this idea that by investing in a funeral plan or a burial policy or anything like that, many are actually thinking this is kind of looking forward. This is investing in my future. But perhaps the misunderstanding is that, no, it's not. Did you find that?
Yes, I think education around the different types of investment and ways to save for retirement are definitely, there's a massive lack of education and just engagement from the industry as a whole, and potentially even interest from general South Africans. They're faced with lots of expenses. I mean, we've seen how petrol's increasing, everyday costs are going up, and many South Africans are potentially struggling to put money away for retirement. But every little bit helps, and I think it really is important that it becomes a national agenda, because at the end of the day, if you do not have money when you are retired, you become a massive burden on your friends, on your family, and on the state.
Yeah, indeed. Let's look at what critics are saying at the moment, and a lot of viewers sort of saying, hang on a second, this looks like a white company that has conducted the survey, and they don't necessarily understand black culture and how important burials are to the black community. You mentioned that the survey covered 1 million people, but let's dig a little deeper into what people are saying in terms of the company behind it and how important burials are to black culture.
Certainly don't detract from how important burials are, but probably the biggest point is that when you're providing for retirement, we're not saying that you shouldn't have a burial policy, and that's not what the survey is saying at all. But it's just saying that there's a greater emphasis placed on funeral policies and burial policies as opposed to providing for retirement whilst one is still alive. So I think it's just around the findings of the report are the findings of the report, and it's just the trends along racial lines that have been identified. So it speaks to the need for the broader industry to engage with as many South Africans as possible to educate around the need for retirement savings. Yeah. Certainly in no means diminishing the importance of burial savings.
Okay. The other mention is of women, and I'd like to just touch on this for a little bit because according to the survey, we see that 40% of women across all demographics have no investments or savings in any form. Let's elaborate a bit more on this. Why?
Sure, certainly. The findings from the report actually showed that, and I suppose before we actually get into the findings, quite important stats to contextualize some of the findings is that in South Africa, it's been shown that women earn generally about 25% less than their male counterparts and have a much longer life expectancy. So both of those impact on your retirement outcome. When we looked at savings habits and the findings from the report showed that the general levels of savings between men and women were relatively similar. However, how they were saving was significantly different. It alluded to the fact that women generally are saving via a bank account and in cash-type products, saving for everyday expenses, supporting families and everyday emergencies, as opposed to men who are generally saving in the stock market for growth over the longer term. The implication of that is with women who generally have a much longer life expectancy and potentially earn less than men, by not saving with a long-term focus in products that can provide inflation-beating returns and provide security at retirement, they are potentially falling victim to the retirement problem that South Africans are facing by not having enough capital at retirement when they reach retirement to support their lifestyle.
Yeah. Just also what I found quite interesting was that a lot of people do not trust these investment tools, and they fear giving their money to someone to invest and they may actually lose it. A, they don't know how much their pension is actually worth, and B, they're worried about the economy and worried about where their pension is going to be invested and actually get a lot less out of it than what they had originally thought. And that, I think, is also a driving factor behind the fact that people would rather maybe stash the money under the bed, and at least they know how much is there, as opposed to putting it away and not knowing at the end of the day when you can access it and how much it'll be. You know, how do you get rid of that mindset?
Leanne, you've touched on quite a few important points. Specifically regarding investing, there's a lot of technical jargon. Often a lot of companies make it out to be significantly more complex than it really needs to be. Saving for retirement is relatively simple. You need to put away a consistent portion of your salary on a monthly basis. You need to know how much you're currently invested. You need to know where you're invested. Are you in an appropriate product that will deliver inflation-beating returns over the long term, that will match the fact that you have another 20 or 30 years until retirement? And what fees are you paying? At the end of the day, there are a lot of headlines that potentially scare people off around whether it's Brexit or the US raising interest rates. But when you're saving for the long term and you have 20 or 30 years, it's more about actually taking that action to put money away consistently on a monthly basis, should we say rather, that will have a much greater outcome on your final retirement value by actually taking the action to save than what is happening over the short term in the markets. And I think the industry is certainly at fault for this in terms of the way that the industry engages with retirement savings and retirement savers, should we say, rather. We need to take a much more simple, straightforward, direct approach and focus on those things that retirement savers can control. They can't control what's happening in the market, but they can control how much they are saving on a monthly basis.
All right, Chris.
And I think in terms of education and product providers, they certainly need to make this information more easily available to savers.
All right, Chris, thanks very much for talking to us here on the program. Chris Eddy is an investment analyst at 10X Investments, talking to us about this report revealing that Black South Africans invest more in funeral and burial policies than they do in their retirement annuities or provident funds. All right, let's take a break.